Yeah, it's 5, so you can go whenever.
Okay, all right. Good evening. My name is James Costello, and this is Network Survival WCS. I am the CISSP, a CompTIA SME, which basically means I'm one of the guys who helps write the tests that people take at CompTIA. My specialty is the Security Plus. I'm a CNSE, a CCSP, an MCSE, and blah, 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 blah. I'm currently the director of engineering for Armada Data Solutions, a consultancy out of Atlanta. I'm a founding member of SecKC and CCCKC. I blog occasionally at this address, and I'm neither a ninja nor a pirate. Network Survival WCS, worst case scenario. For me, this is my personal worst case scenario. You start a new job. Your boss comes to you, hands you a Windows 7 laptop and says, all right, I want you to find out as much as you possibly can about the network in the next 45 minutes, but here's the caveats. You have a basic image without any of your favorite tools on it. You've got a basic user account, so you've got no elevated administrative privileges to do anything with. Your boss wants you to find out as much on the network as you can. You're not allowed to install any new software on the system. Your internet browsing is going to be strictly monitored, and you cannot elevate your permissions on your local workstation. So we'll knock it down into 3 basic areas: black, gray, and white. Black is don't do anything that's violates your boss's rules, so you can't go and install any software on there. Getting a block page on your internet browsing will get you into trouble with your boss. There can be other things that you can come up with that will be in this black area. Anything that really violates the spirit of this worst case scenario that you're in. Some of the gray areas, loading and running software off a USB key. Yeah, you didn't really install it on the computer, but you ran it. And using your cell phone to do your searches. I'm calling that gray because it kind of violates the real spirit of the exercise. And then white, it's just using what you've got. So first off, I just want to remind everybody, if you're ever in this situation, don't be Bob. You might know Bob from his appearances on various podcasts. Bob does things without permission. Being Bob can make you lose your job. And in this scenario that I've said, if you do a Bob-related action, your boss has told you you're going to get fired. Bob has lots of great stories, but most of them are really object lessons and not really instructions for living. Bob might end up under indictment at some point. Don't be Bob. All right. Really what I'm looking for people to do in this whole scenario is think inside the box. We've spent a lot of time trying to get outside the box, and we've really lost focus on what the things are inside the boxes. Working within the limitations that are provided to you, using what you have available to you, and potentially repurposing something that you got on your system that wasn't initially intended to do what you want it to do. So it's not this box, and it's not that box, and it's definitely not those boxes. Just like the TARDIS, your box is bigger on the inside than you really think about. There's a lot more to it than a lot of people take into consideration, because there's a lot you can do with just a base install. One of the neat things you've got there, just without getting to the command line, you've got Network Explorer. If your box has been connected to the network for a little bit of time, you open this up and you can start looking for other computers that are connected there. So you can start finding things out. Now, if you can quickly determine what the naming scheme for devices are, you'll start figuring out what things are out there. Servers tend to have role-specific names associated to them. Workstations, those can really vary. A lot of people just simply use either the person's name and PC, or they go in and they set something on some naming scheme. Some naming schemes aren't going to make any sense to you. Flourish, the servers in my home network are all based on Harry Potter's instances. Nobody really knows what they do except me. So it gets a little more complicated for other people to come look at my system, but you might be in a business environment, they're going to name them things that they're going to know what they are. So this will give you some insight into the network. And it's just one piece. You can also see any of the printers or any of the other devices that are out there. You can just do a screen capture from this and go, okay, here's the first piece I'm going to do. One of the things that I always recommend when we get into the next part is bring up Notepad and start taking notes. It's a simple application and you can put a lot of information into it. The other piece that's in there, you can also use OneNote. OneNote is beautiful for taking screen caps and sticking them in there. It'll tell the time that you were doing things. And in the scenario that I've created here, it'll show your boss in the 45 minutes you were looking through things, here's the information that you found during this time period. And it'll also do texts and all those things copied into it. It really is kind of a neat tool to use. Now, I'm going to go further into the box here and start talking about the command line. There's 368 different command line tools in Windows 7 and Server 8, Server 2008. Not all of them are really available to you because some of them require elevated privileges and some of them just aren't available on a regular workstation. There's approximately 60 of them that are going to be helpful in finding out more information about the network. I broke them down into 4 categories. Your local system information, finding out more about your box, because your box can actually tell you a lot about the ways that the network is connected. The network and remote system information, this is how you're going to go out and find different pieces. And then once you start knowing where things are at, network and remote access, getting into those things that are out there. And then I've got the advanced tools, the things that are deeper into the box, the things that are probably going to have me doing other talks because there's a lot you can do with the tools in that section. Your local system information, here's the whole list of the ones that I think are useful. That's a lot to go through, so I cut it down a little bit. Local system information has the largest number of tools. Some of these things are going to be really familiar to you. ipconfig, ARP, net, NBTstat. NBTstat is still in Windows 7. It's in Windows 8. We're supposed to have gotten rid of NetBIOS forever ago, but everybody still uses it. It just amazes me that it's still there. Some things you might not know or use because you might use things that are more graphically based. You might use a tool that does all of your registry entries. You've got regedit. You can do reg control via reg. You can look at the routes that are on your network. If you're being passed different routes via DHCP, you'll know that. Okay, now I got 2 paths to check out when I start pinging things. And who am I? ipconfig. 2 of the ones that are really, really good in this is alt. This is going to show you your gateways, what network you're on, what your DNS servers are, because that's going to give you some targets to start looking at when you get into the second section. It also tells you how your box is configured. The other piece that this is really good for is if you reboot, your DNS cache is flushed. But when you reboot and log in, what's the things that you're going to immediately connect to? You're going to connect to your domain controllers. And you're going to need to know the names of them to be able to connect to them. And all of that information is available via the display DNS command, or the display DNS key or switch. It really is kind of cool to be able to see all of these things that are in there. If you ever log into somebody's box and you wonder kind of where they've been recently, ipconfig/display DNS, it'll dump the whole thing for you. And you can know where somebody has been browsing on that system. ARP, this is your MAC address information. It's really useful for things that are on your same network. Anything that's off your network is going to use the MAC address of whatever gateway that the system goes through. Combined with ipconfig all and ping, you can determine what type of device is out there, because you have the ability to go out and see what something is. Apple products use Apple network cards. IBM printers use IBM network cards. HP's the same way. You can start telling things about devices without ever knowing their names. It really becomes something much more useful than just, oh, hey, I know a couple of things, I can do an ARP/A and show everything. You can start figuring out what these devices immediately around you are. Net. This is kind of a powerful command. We used to use it in the DOS days to map network drives. Now you've got some other things that are there. The display that you got when you went into the Explorer to show all the different things, you can do that at the command line, and it shows as many devices that it's aware of in your domain. Net user, you can enumerate local user accounts, even ones you don't have access to or are above privilege to you, so you can figure out some of the things that are there. Net statistics, you gather information about the workstation and the server processes on the local computer. NetStat or NBTstat, gather net BIOS information. You can see where your Windows and SMB servers are. Where are your file shares? Where can you start looking for data? It's very useful for statistics gathering. It's very useful for figuring out, okay, I get all of these things. Okay, this is where my file shares are. This is where all of the network documents seem to be. I'll be able to start tracking back to those. Route. This is display your routing information. Are there multiple gateways on your system? That can be very telling on a system. Most people use one route out of a network, but every now and then in a really complex network, you might have multiple routes to get out of something set via DHCP on a workstation or manually set on the server. So that's going to tell you a little bit more about that. Reg is really good. Now, here's one of the crazy things about this. You can query about 95% of what's in your registry with the reg command. You just need to know what strings to look at, and it'll tell you command completion. It'll show you where pieces of the registry are. You can do it in such a way that you're not making any changes. All you're doing is getting information. And it becomes very easy to start telling information about, okay, here's the domain I belong to. Here are the other systems in the forest. What can I start gaining information about? Who am I? Get your LDAP information about your account. This is going to give you group information, the full string of where your account is. This can be very, very useful when you if you get that list of local accounts that are on the system or system accounts that are there, you use this, now you know what the login parameters for that person are going to be, because you can tell based on that what they are. All right. Then your network and remote system information gathering. Again, you've got quite a bit of things here that you're going to start looking at. So I narrowed it down a little bit more. Again, we've got some things we're familiar with, the ping, the path ping, tracer, NS lookup, but some of the other ones that are more interesting. Off of a Windows system to another Windows system that you have rights on, you can use some of these things to gather information about that remote box without having administrative rights on the remote box. Ping is pretty powerful. You can create scripts that you can use to basically do a ping sweep of an entire network using single pings. I refer to it as the noisy cricket on your computer. The reason I do that is because if you do the standard 3 pings, any IDS system out there is going to be looking for that. A single ping here and there, it's not going to notice those as much. But 3 pings in a row, followed by 3 pings in a row, the next address, that's where you're going to start running into things. You can resolve host names based on IP addresses by having it reach out and touch those things. Limit the number of attempts. You can determine the source address that it's going out from on your box if your box has multiple addresses assigned to it. So you can know, okay, this is really useful for troubleshooting. If you're sitting there and you try and ping a system and you can't ping it, it may be because it's actually pinging from a source that cannot actually reach that. It may be something where you've been given 2 different routes, but the firewall that you're routing through on the secondary interface, the secondary address, is actually looking for a different source address for it to be coming from other than the one that is currently assigned on your system. And if you've used Windows systems for a long time, you know that reboot to reboot, there can be times when the source address on your server will change. It can be very frustrating. This will help you troubleshoot that particular one. Tracer, not to be confused with Tracer T. YouTube link is right there. You can test the path that your packets take. Rather than just knowing, oh, I got there, I know what path I followed. Are you taking multiple hops? Am I on the same network? What kind of information can you gather off of that? Pathing. I like pathing because not only does it tell you the path that it takes, it tells you basically how responsive the systems are along the path, because it does a whole series of pings along the way. Latency and loss information, you can identify where slowdowns are on your network. So if you're trying to get to you get a server name and you do a path ping to it, and you get this really long delay during a section of it, that server may not be in your local office. It may be somewhere remote, and you've just discovered the path that it takes to get to another location in the company. NS lookup. You've got the ability to go through and connect your DNS servers and pull what your domain controllers are, if they've set the definitions for your mail servers internally. You can find your directory replication servers, those things that are, you've got one shared directory that people are on, that is the master directory that's copied between multiple servers. You can find where all of those servers are because it uses DNS to sync between them. I like GetMac because you have the ability to reach out to another server and go, hey, tell me your MAC address. I don't know what this remote device is, but if it's a Windows device and I've got, I can reach out to it, it'll come back and tell me, oh, hey, I've got this MAC address. Okay, now I know, now I've got a good guess as to what it is. If it says it's got a Dell network card on it, more than likely it's a Dell server or a Dell workstation that's out there. It really is limited to Windows devices. I would love if this application had the ability to reach out to anything else and go, hey, can you tell me what your MAC address is? But it doesn't. NetSH, you can gather network information about local and remote systems. Look for other DNS servers that are out there. You can pull that information off of remote boxes. Look for other gateways that are out there so you can follow different paths. Now, this is one of the more interesting ones that are out there. If you remember in Windows Server 8, when you started putting these up on your network and you would remote desktop to something and you needed to put a new address in there, and you inadvertently hit that drop down and suddenly you have this list of servers that are out there. This is the back end piece that's going out there and finding out where all of the terminal servers are. This will show you remote desktop session hosts out there, terminal servers. So now you know what servers can be remotely accessed. That gives you a lot more information about what things are used. If one of them happens to say Bastion host, there's a good sign that that one has access to pretty much everything else that you might need access to. Now, getting a little bit tighter, your network and remote system access tools. Again, we've got some that are familiar. Finger, MSTSC, but a couple that you may not be familiar with. IRFTP and WinRS. Finger's kind of one of those funny things. The remote server's got to have the Finger service running, but you can gather a lot of information using Finger. You can pull back configuration information, especially if Finger's not really well configured on the remote side. If you've got a Windows box running Finger, more than likely somebody just turned the service on and it's got no controls on it. You can do user enumeration. Windows 2003 and older don't have it, but Windows 2008 and later do. It can be there, and it can be a lot of information that you might not be able to get elsewhere. MSTSC. I actually prefer to use this than to pull up the remote desktop client, just because it's a single string, type it up, you're ready to go. You can pass parameters. On your 2000 and 2003 servers, you can get to the admin console, the actual terminal console that's sitting there on the box. So you can get to that. So you don't have 2, but 3 remote desktop sessions on a box. You can also set it to non-caching mode, so you're not really caching a lot. It gets a little, your performance degrades a little bit. You can also turn on support for multiple monitors here. It's an entire script to just, you can script this out and say, hey, I want to be able to hit this. It'll pop it up, and you can put the information in there. You can also put in username and password right there. Of course, it's going to appear in clear text if you're putting that in a script, so I would advise against that. IRFTP. One of the things that inspired this talk was I'm doing work for a client. They shipped me a laptop. It's completely locked down. I'm looking at it. One of the things I notice is, oh, hey, it has the USB controls on there. I can't download files off there. Oh, great. They've got some security thought here. But as I'm doing this talk, as I'm prepping it, I'm looking, there's got to be some other ways to get around this. Well, if you've got a USB infrared dongle, you plug that in, it's a HID device. It's not a storage device, so those USB controls don't affect it. IRFTP, I can FTP files to another system using infrared. I just have to be within close distance. I can put another notebook right up next to it, transfer files right across. I think that one's pretty scary. I don't know why that's there. I think a lot of it was originally designed for syncing a phone, passing data to a phone that would have those infrared systems on it, passing data to a printer, but you can do storage transfers with it. I mean, you are going across infrared, so it is pretty slow, so if you're going to copy 10 gigs of files, be prepared to wait. WinRS, basically a remote shell on a system. Manage and execute processes on there. You can call any and all of the related commands that we've talked about so far here on those remote systems if you've got the right rights to be able to do it. And since most of these have been just, since these have all been basic utilities, you can WinRS and tell it to give you back that off of the system. So you'll be able to pull data information off of that remote box. So now your advanced tools. These are the things that are a little more in depth. They've got a little more to them, and a couple of them start to get into that gray, almost black area, because they're a little more powerful and that you really need elevated privileges to get them. I also refer to these as my opportunities for more talks. So it's a file compare utility. I can look at 2 servers and compare information that's on those two systems, see if there are differences. What kind of information can I gather from these boxes? Once you find something of interest and it's in 2 possible locations, you find a password.txt file on 2 different servers, you want to compare the 2, see if they're exactly the same. even though they've got different dates, that'll be able to tell you if they're the same. Run as. Now this is definitely going to get you into the don't elevate your privileges, because this is the way you elevate your privileges. It's Windows version of sudo. Allows you to run more tools, regadd, regdelete, WinSat, which is going to give you even more information than a lot of the utilities that we've talked about so far. WMIC, it's a powerful tool for gathering information, scheduling tasks, launching applications, querying event logs, rebooting systems. WMIC can be really useful for looking on your own box, to go through your log files to know, hey, I want to know what's connecting to me. I want to see what services have gone up and down in the last few hours on this box. It can be local and remote. It's very, very powerful. Pretty much everyone that I've talked to who hasn't mastered it yet has told me it's very complicated and it can take a long while to really get used to some of the tweaks that are in there. But once you get your mind around it, it's really a powerful tool. A lot of that pushback from WMIC got put into PowerShell. And Microsoft refers to it as a task-based command line shell and scripting language designed essentially for system administration. There's a lot of things you can't do on a default box. You don't have telnet, you can't do a port scan, you can't really do set and off file changes within a system. You've got the ability to do add-ons into this that'll allow you to do SSH, you can do HTTP gets, HTTPS, so you can use APIs and start doing some of the things that you can do with Python or some other languages that are out there, you can do in PowerShell. So a lot of scripting that is in Python will translate over there. It's going to be a little clunky because not all of the same things are there, but you really have the ability to use it. I'm currently this is the next piece that I'll talk about in more depth, because there's a lot to it. Telnet not being on your system can be really frustrating, because one of the things that, even though we don't telnet to other boxes, the thing we use it for now is, I want to go check and see if a port is specifically open on a box. That's what most people use telnet for now. And when we don't have it, it gets really frustrating to go telnet, oh, it's not installed. You can use PowerShell to go out and do those port checks. You can actually do a bunch of scripting with this and be able to reach out to various different boxes and do health checks on them. Hey, is port 80 up? No, okay. Connect to the remote box, recycle the World Wide Web Service, so that make sure that's back up. Am I having issues? What kind of things can you do with that? And you can do if-thens within it. It really is powerful. Now I'm opening it up to questions.
So when you're doing information gathering, are you compiling a final report in this scenario?
In this scenario, not necessarily a final report for the 45 minutes. The original idea is how much information can you get? What can you find out about the network in this? And it's really, okay, so what do you know, what can you do? Because you've got the job, now you've got to prove that you know things. And these are some really pretty straightforward, pretty simple tools to be able to reach out and do things on a very locked down box.
Right.
So,
you could probably just patch the output to a file.
Mm-hmm.
That way you could easily just say, here's
Yep.
all the files. Here's everything I found.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can do that. Yes.
You have to be admin, right, to set up PowerShell to run unsigned scripts?
Depends.
Okay.
The way you get around doing unsigned scripts like that is you open the script up and copy and paste it in. So, unfortunately, that's if you've got access to the box, signed unsigned kind of goes away, because you can open up the script and just run it a line at a time to get that information going.
Or copy and paste it to a new script.
Yes. that is then signed by your local system, which it then says, oh, hey, I can run that. Any other questions?
What are all the catch names starting at slide 1?
I have no idea. These were all ones that I grabbed off of Flickr using the Creative Commons search off of creativecommons.org. So I was just, I thought each one seemed to fit the slides. So any other questions?
Another one thing, there are collections out there as well of like web shells
Yep.
for PowerShell and everything else. And the HTTP and HTTPS get from PowerShell, you can go out and maybe, put iCAD or any other shell you want on there. So you go out, put Metasploit or something on one of your boxes, run in PowerShell, and pull that locally onto that machine, and then do more work
Yep.
from another target machine.
Yep. PowerShell can open up a whole world of things that you can do with the box, and most of them don't even require that you elevate your privileges. And that's one of the other things is you can run a PowerShell script as somebody else using runads. So, one of the things that I use PowerShell for quite often is I dump out configurations from firewalls, and because I'm on a Windows platform, I use it as for set and auth commands to find things and change things and gather more information out of just a plain dump of a firewall config, and then make the changes that I need to do and re-import the lines that I've changed so that it can be a very functional thing. When I can do an entire report into an Excel spreadsheet using that to pull it out of the firewall and then put it into the Excel spreadsheet broken down by what type of rule it is, the name, what the configuration is. So it can be very powerful for tweaking and modifying the information that you've gathered into other things.
Does the PowerShell handle XML data feed as well?
Yes, yes. So I'm the more I use PowerShell, the more I enjoy it. So I think it's definitely something, if you haven't touched yet, really get into it, because Microsoft, even on their server side, has moved a lot of things into the PowerShell. Exchange, the last couple of versions of Exchange, there are things you can't do in the GUIs. You actually have to go to the PowerShell and make these changes there. One of the other things that's really useful about that is you can script out entire changes for those kinds of things. Say your company gets purchased and you need to change everyone's email address name, add an email address to absolutely everyone. You run a script to do that rather than going in and clicking and adding and clicking and adding and clicking and adding. It'll take you 45 minutes to write the script to do that, or 3 days to go through 3,000 people.
The other thing too with scripting is if you're in any type of compliance, you can script in your logging.
Yep.
Date and time, made this change. When the change, here's the outcome, write it to a file, do the next change. Your work, the paperwork is done as well.
Yeah. I worked for a web hosting company for about 3 years, and one of the guys I worked with hammered into everybody who was new and who was coming in to do things. If you do something once, get it done. If you do something twice, script it, because there's going to be a pretty good possibility that you're going to have to do it more times than twice. So the more you get into scripting, you actually can simplify your life, and you can get into doing more other things of the thinking inside the box. If you spend all your time going clickety, 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 click to get through things, you don't have time to go look and parse your logs to be able to look for, hey, I've had somebody trying to log in to this box remotely for the last 2 days. You can use PowerShell to go through and pull those logs and be able to say, okay, I'm looking for denies on this, and if I see X number within this amount of time, send an email to this email address. Hey, I've seen 15 attempts to log into this system that were unsuccessful in the last 3 minutes. That's typically an indication that someone is going after your system. Or someone has completely forgotten their password and you need to go do that. Being able to call someone because they've tried their password 6 times and their account is now locked out and go, hey, I noticed your account was locked out. Do you want me to reset that for you? It does amazing things to your work relationship with those people because you're now looking out for them. You're able to do things proactively. You're not waiting for them to get a call for you to fix something. That proactive nature wins you points with everybody you work with because you're looking out for them. They're able to continue to do their job rather than have to pick up their phone and go through the help desk and do all of these things. The more you can do in a proactive and active form, the better off your life is going to be. So, you'll get to do more of those fun things like reading logs. And actually, really, if you're reading logs now, other than to find out, oh, hey, I installed a new piece of software, I need to figure out how it actually writes logs into the log system, what information is there so I can go in and write scripts to look for things that are related to that. Stop and start the service. See if you can kill the service. See what it does when those things happen. So you can script all of that, so you can set alerts for your PowerShell to kick off on a regular basis to do those kinds of things.
And if you're just starting to review your logs and get into PowerShell, use Pareto's law. Look at the top 10 events 1 week, script them, good, bad, or indifferent, filter those out of your logs, and then do the same thing next week. Take the top 10 you haven't dealt with, and now you're building a log management program that works for you, whitelisting what you believe is good, and alerting on what's bad.
Yep. Anyone else?
I just want to agree with what he said.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Tim has brought up. You take a focused approach to anything you do. A lot of people troubleshoot in a nonlinear fashion. This popped into my head. This popped into my head. This popped into my head. If you can start doing those kinds of things a little more linear, what are the top 10 things that are going on? All right, we've got these kinds of issues going on here. This particular thing has been hitting us again and again and again. Let me focus on that, and now I can focus on the next thing that's doing it. Low-hanging fruit, high visibility things. When you take care of those kinds of things, your stock in the company will go up because if it's something that takes down the system and it's something simple to fix, your bosses will love you because you're looking out for things. If you stop being reactive of, oh, hey, the server is down, you really get a lot more interaction with your boss, and you can actually start getting more than just, here's an assignment, here's the thing. They'll start asking you, hey, what do you want to add to this? So you can walk in and on your first day, show your boss everything that you found, and then you can start saying, here are the things that I kind of noticed about this. Here are the things that I suggest that we start moving, because this could really be a test more than anything. It's not just necessarily that everybody gets a non-administrative access to their machine and the ability to do that. It could simply be a test of, what are you able to do when you don't have a lot? And yeah, Tim?
Another thing James said, he was talking about when you add a new service, install new software, you're looking at the logs. What if you've got a fragile service that falls over all the time? You can now go in and look at the logs. Maybe when it crashes, it doesn't write things to the logs that it normally writes there every 30 seconds. So instead, and Windows can say, it's still running. If you look at the log and say, you know, it's been 5 minutes, I haven't seen any activity from this software in the log, you can just go ahead and stop the service, restart it, and note that it crashed this day and this time, and continue on and not have to wait for calls from someone saying, oh, the server's down again.
Yeah.
I know you just left the office, but could you turn around and come back because it's 5 o'clock and we need to get this done? Or you can't go to your meeting this afternoon at ISSA or ISACA, or you can't go to DEF CON because this has fallen over again and this is the 10th time this week.
It's definitely true. A proactive approach and inside the box, knowing your box, what it does, what applications are there. With PowerShell, you can have your box tell you, oh, these are all the applications that are installed. Have that run on a daily, weekly basis and have it compare the two. And when you see a change and you haven't installed anything on there, okay, what's going on here? If it's got a queue number and a string, oh, it got patched by our patch server. That's something new that's there. That's something that I just need to go back and verify that that was something we actually pushed out. A little easier to do. But if suddenly you've got a whole bunch of new processes that are running on here, now you can start looking at it. Okay, so what can I do? What can I start reaching out and start doing with this box? Proactive administration. Being able to reach in and know what your box does. I have been on numerous conference calls where I've asked the person who has identified themselves as the server owner, the server administrator, what software do you have installed on this software, on this server? And the response is, I don't know. I don't get that. And being proactive and knowing what's on there, then you can know, oh, hey, this software is running on here. I don't think anybody thinks that it's still running on here, but I'm still getting connections on it. I know it was supposed to move to another server. I think they haven't reconfigured the other end properly. So maybe we just need to sit down and have a talk with your application people. Hey, I know you thought you moved it over here, but I'm still seeing traffic for it. Your net stats, that you can start pulling netstat via PowerShell. Because any of those other commands that are there, you can have PowerShell call them and pull that information in. It says, okay, here's my netstats. Here are all the connections. If I say, okay, number of connections to this particular server, it's a remote desktop server, or it has a specific purpose, and this particular port should have like between 60 and 500 connections at any given point. And but we do occasionally spike up to 1,000. So if I hit 10,024, if I do a net stat and it shows me, oh hey, I've got 1,048 connections going on this, I want to be alerted on that because that's more than double what I'm expecting, and you're going to be able, you need to be able to react to that. Finding out about an incident 6 months down the line because all the credit cards that you had on your system at that time had gotten compromised is a lot different than, oh hey, we saw this start, we blocked the remaining numbers of those connections.
Don't forget about capacity cover too.
Right.
How often do we spike above normal?
Yeah.
When you walk in and go, we need a new server because everything's so slow and it happens all the time. Bosses will go, we just want some more money. You walk in and say, normally we have this many connections. It's been growing by 35% over the past 2 months. It's projected to reach capacity on the server in 3. It's going to take us 2 months to configure and get everything installed on there properly. We need to order this next week to have it on time. And you've got the data to show what you need.
Right, because all of these tools become more powerful for you once you start being able to use all the things that you can run with elevated privileges. So it gives you opportunity and it gives you those chances to run things and gather more information. Because knowing what your system is doing, knowing what it's connected to, goes beyond this worst case scenario of your first day on a new job where you're sitting there and trying to find out what's all out there, and it becomes more powerful of in our server or server subnet, I've got 52 servers. Suddenly I've got 6 more servers in there and I'm the only person who installs systems into that network. Something's going on. Having the ability to, if you don't provide Wi-Fi or you've got a segment of your network where there isn't a Wi-Fi hotspot and it's done there intentionally, you can start scanning your IP ranges and look, especially in the segment that you know that covers that particular area. If you see a new device that matches like, oh hey, a Belkin or a Nets, one of a home-based router's MAC address, you now have the ability to start looking for, hey, somebody's plugged in a wireless access point over here, and be able to do that.
So you got a really smart user who is the MAC address cloning. He was caught last time doing this. Now when the MAC address cloned it, so your traffic for that IP address has just gone up
Yep.
a whole bunch. Now
Then
you
you
know,
start-
if the same MAC, way more traffic coming from that machine, you should not be running these services that iPhones run. I wonder what he did.
Yep. Any other questions? I want to say thank you to Sec KC who actually helped me come up with the concept for doing this talk. We do 5-minute tool talk on Kali Linux. We do 3 of those every month. And I'm sitting there and I was preparing one to give because I found a tool that I really liked and I went, wait a minute. What about all the tools that are in Windows? Let's go back and start looking at some of those. BSides Las Vegas for having me, and Sky Talks over at DEF CON for allowing me to present there as well. People who inspired me for this were Jurist, Heaven Sent, and Jason Street. Thanks to my wife and daughter, and the furry animals that live and work in my office and keep me company during any day. And thank you to all of you for coming tonight. I really appreciate you coming out and spending some time with me. Now I'm going to go take a nap. I'm kind of tired.